Covering news that matters. Fox 23 News at 6:30 starts right now.
We start with a Fox 23 exclusive at 6:30. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Shay Rozzi. We're going in depth with State Superintendent Ryan Walters about the changes he's trying to make in Oklahoma public schools. Now, we first told you at 5. Walters was here at our station this afternoon to discuss some of these important topics impacting students, teachers, and parents in Oklahoma. Here's Fox 23's Devin Lyon with his full unedited interview with the state superintendent.
I just want to say thank you so much, State Superintendent Ryan Walters, for being with us today on this segment here at Fox 23 News. It's really a pleasure having you being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So we're going to start with talking about this week. You sent out a memo about the social studies standards reform. If you could just briefly describe what that is and what process is ahead of parents and teachers in Oklahoma.
Yeah, we're so excited to bring together an executive committee of some of the best experts in state and across the country to develop social studies standards. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our kids have a better understanding of American history than any other kids in the country by making sure they understand the founding of this country, what makes America exceptional, what makes us the greatest country in the history of the world, and also understand the role the Bible played in American history. It was the most cited document in the 17th and 18th century, so they need to understand the context, the historical context of the Bible and our history. So we're very excited to make sure there's no left-wing indoctrination in our history, no DEI, no CRT, but a focus on American exceptionalism.
Okay. And what does that process look like over the next few months? Is that just like a one-week thing, or are we looking at like to the next 2 school years out? How's this process lay out right now?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so this will be over the next several months. We have over 80 teachers from across the state that are doing a lot of the writing. Then we have a review committee who oversees the written material and give feedback. And then we have this executive committee that oversees the entire process and gives feedback. So you'll see this finished product in the spring. So we're looking at March, April, rolling that out, and then the legislature will get to have their say into it as well as we continue to move forward.
I saw the list of committee that you had in this memo. What went into that selection process?
Yeah, we looked for the folks who understand American history the best and have really articulated American exceptionalism in a way that will be best for our kids to be able to understand. And so you see folks like Dennis Prager, you see folks like Everett Piper, a local historian here from inside the state, Kevin Roberts. So again, we went around the country, looked around the state to find some of the best and brightest to help our kids understand our history.
So why this change in social studies standards? Like, what are the problems you have with the social studies standards that we have in place?
Yeah, what we've continued to see is Joe Biden, radical leftists, the teachers union have pushed the Bible out of schools. They push any kind of conversations about American exceptionalism out of schools. And so we need more clarity in the standards to say, no, in Oklahoma, we're going to teach about America. We're going to teach about American exceptionalism. So it's really to make sure that that's crystal clear in our standards so that we can make sure that all of our kids understand what made this country great. And also we want our kids to be great citizens to continue to make this a great country. But look, our history and our classrooms have been under attack by the Biden administration and by teachers unions. And so we're going to fight back and make sure our kids have a great history.
Gotcha, absolutely. And then, so for this next question, you've kind of already reiterated a little bit this answer, but we have to talk a little bit more. During your time at Callister, we did have a letter where you said you were happy with the standards of social studies in place at that time. So between when this letter was written and your tenureship as state superintendent, what changed?
Yeah, so I was part of about 120 teachers that were helping writing the standards back then. And there were a lot of good things that were included in the standards. But what we've seen since then and to today are the teachers unions, the Biden administration, and these left-wing groups have attacked everything going on in a classroom and said, listen, we're not going to have you teach the Bible. We're not going to have you teach any historical context of the role that faith played in American history. We're going to push out anything about American exceptionalism. So what we've got to do now is we've got to go back and give even more clarity. Again, at the time that we wrote those standards, you didn't see the level of attack that the left is going on in the classroom. So it's so important that we support our teachers in teaching good history. We give clarity so leftists can't come into the classrooms and undermine American history.
Thanks for answering that. And where have you seen that, you said, attack for the leftists? If you could just go into depth a little bit more on that.
What we continue to see in the classroom are stories. You see the 1619 Project is a great example of that, where it's curriculum that's been pushed into public schools where it says, listen, you have to only look at America through the lens of slavery and through critical race theory. This has become a very popular curriculum across the country. We're not going to allow that in the classrooms in Oklahoma. We're not going to allow the spin from the radical left to embed all parts of history curriculum. So projects like that are going to be left out, and we're going to go back to primary sources where we actually go in and read what Jefferson said. We're going to have more of an emphasis on the Federalist Papers and those founding documents because, again, if your kids are reading American history, they're going to come to the understanding of what our principles are, of how this country was so exceptional and what caused us to lead a very different path than other countries in the world. But that comes with reading history, it comes with reading primary sources, and it comes with not reading what the left has pushed into the classroom that is just completely false.
Okay, and so I'm a big history fan, so social studies is an easy topic for me, so and especially with those primary sources. Now, but with accepting and growing as a nation is accepting some of those dark spots in history, such as we had a news break today on the Tulsa Race Massacre mass grave sites, or the Trail of Tears is very impactful for Oklahoma history. How will those still be taught? Will they be left out with just the love for America, or how will that funnel into Oklahoma curriculum? Because some are concerned that it might be left out entirely.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, because it's so important when you tell America's story. You start with what are our founding principles, right? What were those principles that made us exceptional? And as you study through American history, you study American history through that lens. So are these moments that we lived up to our founding principles, or are these moments where we didn't, right? And that's how you really give students that understanding of the principles made us exceptional, but there's obviously times in American history where we didn't live up to those principles. And so what you do is you got to give all the history. You've got to show the good, the bad, and the ugly so that kids have that true understanding. So we're absolutely going to make sure our kids understand those moments where we fell short of those founding principles. So all of that will be included in our history. We want our kids to have that full, complete history of America.
Okay. And with the Bibles in classrooms, I was in the office when that memo was first made. It caused a lot of excitement. You've heard a lot of feedback both ways towards that, of course. Briefly, can you explain what brought on that memo that you put in as for Bibles to be mandatory in the classroom?
Yeah, so we started this process on standards rewrite about 8 months ago. So we started these conversations, and we had a group of pastors and religious leaders from across the state who wrote us a letter and said, you know, in the standards, it talks about the Mayflower Compact. It talks about natural rights. It talks about the faith of some of the founders and individuals throughout our history. And yet we're hearing that teachers aren't referencing Christian faith or the Bible at all when talking about these individuals. So as we did a deep dive, it's become clear to us these left-wing groups, these left-wing attorneys have attacked any teacher who references the Bible in its historical context. Well, think about the absurdity of that. It's the most read book in American history. It's the most cited book in the 17th and 18th century, so much so it's 3 times more than any other book. It's the most purchased book in American history. Well, if you don't include that in a history curriculum and its historical context, that's academic malpractice. I mean, you have to put the Bible in its proper historical context in the classroom. We are proud to be the first state to bring the Bible back in the classroom in its historical context so students know when Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail and justified his position on civil rights, he pointed to the Bible. He pointed to the Apostle Paul. He pointed to other examples from the Bible. We are not going to allow the left to censor that out and pretend that the Bible played no historical role when the people in our history literally pointed to it as part of their inspiration. So we're going to make sure we are teaching history in a factual way, and that includes the Bible in its historical context.
That was the first half of Fox 23's Devin Lyons interview with State Superintendent Ryan Walters. We'll bring you the second half unedited after this brief commercial break.